here to hear from Shane, and he's going to teach us some good stuff here. As usual, our webinars here are very educational and interactive. So, please, Shane's going to call on you, and he's going to ask questions, and because we want to hear from you. Your information and your responses, your feedback, your ideas are important. And it's all, Shane is here to provide the ideas. But hey, you guys, it's just one big family here we're going to share ideas, and we're looking forward to your participation. That there's the idea of like passive attendees and active participants. And that's what we're hoping that you'll be, as active participants rather than passive attendees. Feel free to pipe in and answer questions, ask questions, and share your ideas. So without further ado, Shane, take it away.
Well, Abraham, let's start by you transferring over the screen, because you haven't disabled that one yet.
All right. Hang on one second here. We're going to share screen. Okay. There you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me this morning. We're going to talk about onboarding and orientation. More importantly, we're going to talk about why the first 60 days is a waste of talent. And again, this is something that we've seen in a lot of different organizations. We're actually working with one right now. And I would say over the last probably couple of years, this has been a really big area of failure for many organizations in how they are welcoming and bringing those new employees on. Now, for some of you, you've kind of seen this before, but I want to give a little bit of background about ourselves. Michael, you could probably give the speech on your own by now. You've seen this a couple of times, so I appreciate that. But for those of you that are new, as I said, my background is in hospitality. I actually worked with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company for about 10 years. And this quote that I have up on the screen was a really important quote for us every day that we would think about. Obviously, we're in the service business, but the reality is that when it comes to customer experience, there is many different interactions. Service is the interaction, customer experience is the journey. So throughout that journey, there are many moments where a customer will come into contact with one of your employees. And what we would always talk about was the understanding that a great attitude delivers great service. A poor attitude is poor service. And every day we'd ask ourselves that simple question: what was the attitude of our team? Now, carry this forward for about the last 20 years. I've been consulting and working with a lot of different organizations. And what we've come to realize, and again, other researchers, is that culture is just the collective hearts and minds and attitudes of your employees. And that's an important sort of understanding. It's the collective. What I want to stress is that in any given day, you could have an employee that's not feeling good. That doesn't mean you have a bad culture. You could have an employee that makes a mistake. That doesn't mean you have a bad culture. But collectively, when the hearts and minds, when your employees don't feel good about what they do and who they do it for, you have a problem. And the question is not, do you have a culture? Because every company, every business, every team has a culture. The question becomes, do you have the type of culture to deliver a great customer experience? Now, that really is important, because I've done a lot of research over the years, and that attitude really manifests itself more important today than at any other time. Why? Social media. We did, again, hospitality-based, but I assume you'll all know TripAdvisor. Again, probably one of the most prominent sort of online communities, obviously giving feedback to hotels, experience, anything in the tourism industry. When we looked at a lot of their stuff and actually talked to TripAdvisor, we recognized there's about 72% of all customer feedback was generated about employees, and particularly their attitude and how they were taken care of. And so what you have to understand is that that attitude manifests itself into the employee's behavior. Those behaviors define reputation. Reputation is brand. So while a lot of companies are advertising like crazy, trying to convince customers that they're this and that, the reality is your online communities, your online chats, all of those things talking about you as an organization have a bigger impact on customers than anything else right now. So that's why I kind of say culture for me is so important. Now, culture is defined by a variety of mechanisms, activities, and people, and they influence the employee. And so what we've been looking at, just as we started out looking at customer journeys, we've really focused in on employee journeys and really thinking about the different touch points that they interact with in their employee journey. Now, for the last couple of weeks, on our webinars, we've been talking about things like the selection process. That is an absolutely key part of the employee journey. Again, their hiring experience really does set them up not only to choose you as their employer, but also to make an emotional connection. Now, today we're going to talk about, as I sort of said, one of the real key ones, which is the orientation and onboarding. What happens in the first 60 days that either makes breaks, either sets people up for success, or has them leave your organization. So again, we've been talking about in our webinars the last few weeks, values, selection, we talked about leadership, and over the course of the coming months, we're going to be talking about many of these different elements. But today we get to talk about orientation and onboarding. And again, it's all for me about an energetic and really great start. And as we go through this process, I want you to think about how your new employees are brought into the company. And I want you to think what you're doing to emotionally connect them to your business, because that's a key part, particularly for younger generations today, is that we have to make sure we create the best possible first impression. So let me kind of reach out to some of you a little bit and just think about that. Why is these first few days particularly, but the first impression so very important? So let's kind of talk to a few people out there. Rocio, what do you think? Come on to that. And why do you think a first impression for a new employee is so critical?
Because it's the, I don't know.
Why do you think it's so critical to have a great first impression?
Because it's the first impression that you have for the company that you start working. And it's very important that you feel comfortable and you feel that you are in a good place.
Okay, and why do you think, because that's exactly right, why do you think that's so important when an employee starts working for you? Why do you think it's so important? Give us some help out there. Who else wants to kind of chime in on this one? Why do you think it's so important to have a good first impression? What do you think?
Well, this is Charles, I think that the first impression and the first day or two kind of sets the tone for the next several months that they're going to be there. So I think they need to come in and, as the previous person said, they need to feel comfortable and they need to feel a sense that they're already part of the team.
Really, that's absolutely right on. So let's talk about what if that doesn't happen. So what happens if they don't feel in those first few days, if they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel part of the team? What do you think happens? Who wants to kind of take that one?
Okay, so I think I'll take that up. Okay, so the first few days, if obviously if they don't feel comfortable, they switch off. And
think about that. What you just said. In the first 2 days of the job, they switch off.
They switch off.
So then what do you think happens?
Yeah, and so they start looking for other options.
It's important what you said there. And this is what people have to understand. If they switch off in the first few days, they're already looking for another job. And they started doing that. Process starts within the first week of a new job. People are already starting to think, I need to find another job. Now, let's take that process. In the first week, they've decided they're going to look for another job. So now what happens during the first 60 days? What do you think? So they've already decided they didn't get comfortable. They're not emotionally connected. They've already decided they're looking for another job, but they're still with you. They still stay because might as well keep the job. So what happens? How do you think they act and interact? Who wants to pick that one up? What do you think?
Well, this is Charles. From my perspective, they're not invested in your company or the success of your company. So their customer service is not going to be up to the par where it should be because they've switched off.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to put them, but it even gets worse than that, I think, because what starts to happen is they've switched off, they sort of got out, but you're still paying them, so there's a cost. You're training them, so you're investing someone else's time and effort into this. knowing that at some point in those 60 days that they're probably going to leave you. I want you all to remember this number. 50% of all people last year who left a job did so in the first 90 days. That's really important to think about. And what we're finding is that obviously younger people play a much bigger part of that. Now, what a lot of managers might say, well, that's just young people. They're so disloyal. They don't have the same work ethic. It's total BS. What they are doing is that they're putting a stake in the ground and they're saying, if this isn't right for me, then I'm better off making a change. We've got to remember, younger people are much more comfortable moving from job to job. They are much more adaptive than we're used to. So they just go, you know what, this is not right for me. You know what, I'm not going to get emotionally invested. And what happens is that they will waste your time. And again, mistakes can happen. You're invested in training, they stick around, then they leave you. That's a real cost. And so it's so important that as we think about this, that you really start to understand that those first few days or that first impression does a number of things. The biggest one for me is that it reinforces with the new employee that they made the right decision. You may have heard of a thing called buyer's remorse. You buy a big ticket item, and in the first sort of day of you buying something really expensive, you have remorse about it and you go, gosh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have bought that. Oh my goodness. Remember that employees can have employee remorse as well, which means in the first day of the new job or first few days, they can suddenly regret that they made that decision to come and work for you. So the first few days is really important because you connect and you reinforce they made a good decision. And then the second one for me is it connects them emotionally. And I want you to go back to that, my definition, hearts and minds. You must connect emotionally with a new employee in the first couple of days because it makes them feel good. And this is something that you've got to be willing to invest in. So when it comes to this idea, I really want to stress first impressions are a big part of it. I talk about two things, orientation and onboarding. I want you to remember that orientation is the first day or days of an employee's job, okay? It's the ultimate first impression. So it's what you do in those first day or 2 days, that's orientation. Onboarding is anything up to the next 60 days. That is the time required to get a person up to speed in the skills of the job. It means they can do the job. So orientation is the first couple of days. Onboarding is the time it takes to train them to be able to do a job successfully. The quote that I use is the first day should be the best experience of an employee's career with you. The next 60 days is teaching them to create a great experience with your customers. So remember those two sides, orientation versus onboarding. So let's talk about orientation. So I want to kind of put it out there because there's been a lot of research done. What usually happens on an employee's first day? Okay, so I want you to think about it. And maybe it's in your organization, maybe it's something that you happen. The only thing I'll say, it's generally not exactly that positive. So Guillermo, I'm going to put it out to you. So come off sort of mute and tell me, what do you think usually happens or what can negatively happen in an employee's first day that may turn them off and not emotionally connect them? So you get to kind of take this one out of the gate. So Guillermo, what do you think? There you go. So what do you think could happen that might turn them off, not get them comfortable, not make them feel good?
I think that from my point of view, that depends, no? Because this is a very interesting point, and the rest of the conversation as well, because in my opinion, mostly cases depends of the interest of the new hiring or the new people. I have cases where some people come to a new job full interested, okay, with energy, but in some point, the interest or the proactive in order to do a deep dive navigation in the new job position is difficult to get of the people, right? So you have two kind of people. The first one is that the people that are interested, looking for more information into the company, relationship with the rest of the team, and you have other people that is expecting that the orientation every single day is the follow-up is extreme. So I think that the first day it depends in mostly cases, okay, for the management, okay, it's clear, but it's the kind of the people that we have to identify, my friend. So I need to know how to identify what is the interest of the people. And I like to have in my team, for example, new hiring related to the people that are investing, develop new topics, looking for information, so the in proactive form, right? So the first day, that depends the behavior of the people from my point of view, and the orientation of the management as well. So
you should have joined us. You should have joined us for our last one, because again, I think what you're talking about is, are we hiring the right people? And that's a really important piece, because I will tell you that every bit of research is that most people turn up on their first day, while they might be outwardly excited, they're actually kind of nervous. The first day is a very important piece. And what you're doing is you're cementing that. And again, the onus is not on the employee on their first day. It is on the company, it's on the manager to set them up for success. But what you're talking about there is that you've got to get the right qualities. Because I agree, we actually had a great conversation in our last one talking about selection, and maybe Abraham can send you a copy of that video, because we talk about how do you get that right person, someone who's interested in learning and growing, the person that you talked about. But the key to this is the first day is that there are so many things that actually turn people off. And this is the thing that's kind of there, is that often an employee will be asked to work straight away. There's no introductions. There's nothing that happens. The department manager is unprepared. I didn't even know they were turning up. I can't tell you how many times we've surveyed employees that said they turned up and the manager was like, oh, you're here for the first day. They weren't expecting them. Their tech wasn't turned up. What happens is that there's just a lack of preparation. And then the other thing, which is the biggest fundamental mistake that we see being made on an employee's first day, is that on the employee first day, they get reviewed a bunch of rules and they fill out a bunch of paperwork. And what happens is an employee on their first day, and I want you to remember this, is open-minded to things that are going on around them. You can actually change people on the first day of a new job if you are prepared. Horst Schulze, who is one of the probably most famous hoteliers, would always remind us, an employee's first day is one of the few days where people are open to changing habits and behaviors. What you have to be able to do is establish the priorities. And that's, if you give them a bunch of paperwork to do, they think the priority is to fill out paperwork. If you tell them about all the rules of the business, they think just follow the rules. And what you're seeing is that none of those things emotionally connect an employee to the business or brand. And then the other thing, which again, that happens a lot with new employees, when we look at all sort of feedback, they sit around waiting for someone to have the time to take care of them. They're sitting around waiting. They're given a handbook to read, or they're waiting for someone to be able to take care of them. And what happens, and again, that piece of it, of not being prepared, not engaged, not ready, is one of the single biggest things that people talk about in terms of not connecting them to the company.
Exactly. This is the reason why, from my point of view, in the first day, you have to prepare a right onboarding plan in order to avoid, for example, the bullet point number 4. They sit around waiting for someone, right? If you have a right onboarding plan, and you keep following the plan, maybe the expectation for the people in the first day will be better.
You've hit it on the head. And that's why we're sort of saying that the employee's first day is your chance to, 1, establish priorities. That is, I want you to remember, on the first day, you want to make them feel welcome, you want to establish priorities, and you want to emotionally connect them. So those are my 3 challenges for you of a new employee's first day. And so I want you to think about now in your orientation, the first day, how do you do that? I want to establish the priorities. What are my priorities for the business? Well, hopefully it's customers. Hopefully it's the brand. Hopefully it's the culture, the values. So think about whether or not you talk about that. How do you make them feel welcome? Do you have people welcome them personally? Is there a welcome card for them? What do you do to make people go, wow, I am now part of this team? And then the third thing is, how do you emotionally connect them to the brand? What can you do so that they suddenly feel a part of it? And that's what we want to sort of think about. There's 3 goals, and this is just the employee's first day. So let's kind of go through what that might look like. So how do you connect the new employees to your business? What sort of things do you think you might talk about? What sort of things could you do, or do you do right now? I'd love to hear from you guys about some of the things that you do that really makes your employees feel good, but it's got to be on the first day. So who wants to sort of take that? Judith, do you have any ideas for us there? What do you do to make your employees feel connected, set priorities, or feel welcome?
Okay, well, I think that first you need to have an idea about the activities for the new employee. If you have a good plan, for example, for what kind of activities they can start with, I mean, for example, simple activities, just to try to involve with another teams, for example, to work with them and, okay, make some interviews, maybe walkthroughs about the activities that they do. And I think that would be a good impression for him or for her, because they can have a good idea about the activities that they normally do. And with the pass of the time, probably you prepare more interviews or more information for the people. Maybe not only with the normal activities, maybe because the strategy of the business and what is our main purposes as a business, what is our main objective. And with the pass of the time, probably you can construct a good objectives for the people, and they can work on them.
Yeah, listen, it's a lot of good. I love the idea of activities. We're going to talk into that. Fernando, what about for you, man? What do you do at your organization or company to make people feel welcome, set priorities, or emotionally connect them to the business?
Okay, maybe we need to set the priorities and focus on the target of the brand. For example, in our business, we need to create the necessity of the new hire to feel the same thing of the whole organization. For example, we need to create they feel support of any part of the team anytime, because it's the first time in the job, maybe the first week, 2 weeks, maybe they accompany with another person with more experience in the organization, and they feel or create the synergy with a complex of the organization that focus that, complete that.
Great idea. And again, remember, that's in your onboarding. So, all right, guys, remember, I'm still talking about the very first day. Orientation is the first day. Onboarding is the second. And what you talked about, Fernando, is mentoring. We're going to talk about in a little bit, because pairing them up with another employee is a really good best practice. But I want you to think about first day. And in the first day, there's certain things that you must get across. So first thing, introduce brand and business. They must get an overview of what you do and who you do it for. And it's usually in a mission statement. What is the purpose of the business? It's the most fundamental question that needs to be answered to an employee. What do we do? Who do we do it for? So that's the first thing that you must explain. The next thing is introduce your customers and make sure that they understand, because if you don't talk about customers on the first day, then it's not a priority. You must talk about who your customers are. Some of the best practices is have an employee be a customer, where they get to actually experience what it's like to be a customer. We've dealt with car dealerships. First day, An employee gets to come in and play a customer and role play and practice to see what's that like. So they actually go through the whole journey at the car dealership. Our restaurant group we work with, first day, again, all new employees get to have a lunch or a meal. At Ritz-Carlton, in the first week, we tried to have every new employee stay a night so they could be a customer. Again, one of the things, we have a retail brand that we work with, Foot Locker. Every new employee gets a pair of new shoes on the first day. Now, none of these are all easily accessed, but the key is, how do you put your employee on the first day in the customer shoes? How do you get them to be that? And again, it might be as simple as just role play, pretend you're a customer, and have some of the employees. One, it's great training exercise, but make sure they understand that the customer is the most important person of the business. Then you want a little history, all right? What defined it? Give them a little background. History is what connects a lot of people. If you look at employees that have been around for a long time, what they're most proud of is the history. They're proud of their tenure. So one of the best practices is have employees that have been there a long time talk to the new employees about what it's like to work there. What were the great moments that they remember of the past? What were the significant moments that define the company? That's a really important piece. And then the last one, I'm going to come back to kind of something that Judith touched on, which is activities. They must do activities around your values. This is a really important element. We're working with a really cool brand right now, lifestyle brand. One of their values and one of their big areas of focus is community work. So on the first day, all new employees actually go to their local charity in the afternoon and spend a couple of hours doing community work for this charity. Because it's so important to the brand, it's so important a part of who they are, and it's not to their core business, but again, on the first day. So what they do is they've had tremendous, and again, for 2 hours, they go and help out at a local kids sort of charity, community-based organization. In all the reviews that come back, it's the number one thing that the new employees talk about. And it emotionally connects them to what's important for the business. And that's your goal. I challenge you that you must do something on an employee's first day where they go, wow. They go, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Oh, I was so welcomed. You have to touch them emotionally. If all you do is give them paperwork, go through the rules, all you've done is you've created a job for them. Anyone can find a job. And what we know is that young people today are less interested in jobs. They want a purpose. They want a challenge. That means you have to connect emotionally to them. So that first day for me is one of the biggest challenges. As I sort of said, we work with a lot of organizations in designing a great first day that connects them to their brand and business. And that's my challenge for you to think about. What are you doing? And it doesn't need to be grand, but it needs to be heartfelt. And so that piece of it is really important. Whatever it looks like, the employee's first day needs to be something special. Now we go to onboarding. So they've gone through the first day. They've had a great experience. Now they're passed off to the department. Now where some of you are talking about is we need to have this plan. We need to have a really detailed plan of what's going to happen to get an employee to a point where they can be successful. They know how to do the task, the skills, and all of that. Now, again, if I go back to our previous webinar, we talked about selection. Most managers have an experience addiction, which means they like to hire people with experience because it means they don't have to do much training. They get them up and running very quickly. The problem is they also bring all their bad habits with them as well from other organizations. Your onboarding should be created with an assumption that the person doesn't know how to do the job. If they get it quicker, then great, you can shorten it. But you should have a really clear understanding of what it takes to train a position. And by the way, every position will be slightly different. So what is the goal of our onboarding program? It is to get the new employees to complete the job. And I want you to remember this. Onboarding is also your chance to determine if you hired the right person. That's a really important thing that a lot of organizations miss. Why do I do onboarding? Why do I do the first 30 days, 2 weeks, however long the train? I'm like, all right, I want the employee to be set up for success, but I need to have a process to ensure I hired the right person. Many times you'll go through this process and you go, oh my goodness, this person is not capable of doing the job. They didn't have the right attitude. And it's important that you're willing to cut, ties at a very early stage. And so remember that. This isn't just about getting an employee trained, it's about you doing an assessment. And so that's an important part of this program is make sure there's an assessment. Now, we've been doing onboarding programs for a while. And what I want to give you is there's 5 key questions that you must be able to answer in your program. When you have an onboarding program, I want you to remember, you've got to answer the question, who's going to train? Where does training occur? When will training occur? What does it look like? What is going to be taught? And then how do you get feedback? So I want you to think about those 5 questions. And I want to kind of take you through because you need to be able to answer those. Who's going to do the training? Where's the training? When will the training? What does the schedule look like? Okay. But what is going to be trained, and then how you're going to get feedback. How will you know if the onboarding was successful? So those are the 5 questions I want you to be able to answer. And you should be able to answer them with confidence if your onboarding program is set up. So let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, who? I want to come back to this and put it out there. Managers are not the best people to do the training. All right, that's really important. Managers are not the best trainers. Employees or other people that do the task will be your best trainers. And that's when we say who. What we find is that when managers do the training, they often get pulled in a lot of different directions and the training is average as best. They're just not, it's not a big focus of them. But many times we see managers being put in charge of the new employees training. The reality is a employee or peer is the best person. Giving them a mentor, and again, I think Judith or someone talked about that earlier, that mentor is so important. Someone who does the job alongside them and who is able to kind of walk them through. Not only do they have someone at their own level that they can connect with, but they also have someone to kind of guide them. So I want you to think about the who. Have you identified, can you identify an employee that one is really good at the job, but most importantly also is really good at representing the values of the organization? They're a good team player. They're positive. They have the attitude. You want your best person next to the new hire because they're going to set a high standard. And that's the person that they're going to live up to. If a manager does my initial training, they're a manager. Again, I might not be ready to live up to being a manager. And by the way, I expect managers to do it. But when I get paired with an employee who's just a rock star and is so good, I'm like, that's who I have to be. So I want you to remember the who. Think about, do you have the right person doing the training, which means can they and are they focused on delivering training in the right way? Next one is where. Remember, the first few days cannot be in the real world. Why? Because in the real world, mistakes can happen. And in the first few days, expect mistakes to happen. So therefore, what you need is you need a setup where employees can be initially away from the real world, but if they show that they're pretty good at what they do, they can quickly transition into the real world. And again, this is where the place. When you put an employee on the front line on their 2nd or 3rd day, and you're going to make them freeze. Because again, they can be a little nervous. Remember, we're assuming they don't have any experience in this. So what happens is that this, for some people, it can be very overwhelming. And what you want to be able to do is you want on the first few days to let someone make mistakes. Remember, they have to be able to make mistakes. Mistakes is how you learn. So having a place that is close to the real world or simulated like the real world is important. A restaurant group we work with, there's one table in the corner of the restaurant that's the simulated table. They put managers and different people there for lunch, and that's where the new employees get to practice. In a hotel, in a housekeeper, they take a room and they make that the practice room. In the car dealership world, they set up a fake customer in the system, and again, they role play continuously on this fake customer so that they can get some practice. In retail environment, they do the same thing. So think about how can you simulate this practice without it being in front of a real customer. The next question that we talk about there is when it happens. Please make sure, again, give your employee a schedule every week of what is going to be trained and who is going to train them. It sounds very simple, but give them a schedule from their 1st, 2nd day and say, this is what your schedule is going to look like. Set expectations with your employees. And that's where a schedule comes out. I also, and I'll touch on this a little later, please set an expectation that you're going to be testing them. It's very important that they have an expectation that throughout their process, they're going to be tested, they're going to be observed. It heightens their awareness that they have to perform. Then it's what will be trained. And this is important because, again, we go into a lot of organizations and they'll have their SOPs and they'll have sort of basic processes laid out, but they don't actually have an organized process for how to teach someone new the skills, the tools, the ability to do the job. I want to make sure that you have a fundamentally an organized path of skill development laid out. It could be a simple piece of paper that what's going to be learned is a continuation. And this is important because for consistency and to really set people up for success in their training, having the same person, having a clear schedule, and knowing what is going to be trained each day is a critical part of your onboarding plan. And when we go to many organizations, we often see that they don't have this in place. And then the piece that I kind of touched on is please test. And please make sure that there is some testing that occurs. Let them know that on day 10, there's 3 skills that they're going to have to observe, that they're going to have to demonstrate. By day 15, there's 6. I want you to set out in that schedule when you're going to test certain things. Some organizations at Risk, we used to test one thing at the end of every day, one skill. And it might be a skill from the previous day, but there would always be a sense of testing that would happen. And so please, we're seeing a lot more of this in the last sort of couple of years, where actual tests have been laid into the onboarding. So it's a gradual progression. The thing I love about that is there's also like a graduation, where when you go through onboarding, you can make kind of a big deal about it. And then the last thing that I really want to make sure you're doing is that you're getting regular feedback throughout this process from the employee. Don't just assume that because training's occurring that the experience is great. Generally, what we say is that 30 to 60 days, you want to have an informal conversation or get some feedback from them. It doesn't have to be formal, though many organizations are doing surveys to those 2 points, 30 and 60 days. But make sure as a manager, remember, there's an assumption, you're not doing the training. So again, you've got one of your employees doing it or maybe a supervisor, but as the manager, you want to sit down and set a couple of times to sit down with a new employee and say, hey, how are things going? Are we living up to your expectations? Demonstrate that level of care is a really great best practice that we've seen in a lot of organizations, and it really does work. It sets a really good expectation with the employee that they're important and that their experience is important to you from the very beginning. So ask yourself those questions. As you're thinking about your onboarding plan today, who is doing the training? Have you got someone that can be dedicated? Again, think about where it's happening. Have you got a space that, again, you can set up that is like the real world, but they can make mistakes in? Think about when it's going to occur. Again, do you have a schedule that you're able to hand out? What's going to be covered with testing? And then, of course, how to get the feedback. Have you got some feedback mechanisms in place? As I sort of said, that's what our orientation and onboarding. And what we find is that so many times that initial 60 days is a terrible waste of talent. We invest heavily in recruiting these people, getting them on board. And what we're seeing is that dramatic number of 50% of people that leave do so in those first 90 days. And that can be really a huge cost to your organization. Get the first impression right. Remember, orientation is their first day, deliver a great experience. Onboarding is how you set them up for success. And while it's not perfect, because you can still lose people from various reasons, what you're doing is removing some of the many issues that we see in many organizations today. And obviously that's causing a lot of problems. So thank you very much. There's some good sort of thoughts and ideas there. Hopefully that's helped to give you some ideas, or at least to think about the challenge of making sure your new employees are set up for success. So Abraham, what do we got? Who's got some questions out there and thoughts as we kind of wrap this up?
Well, actually, what I like to do here is I like to, at this point, I see we have a team here from I don't know how to pronounce that. It's Horbrigger. Did I get that right? Yeah, well, welcome. It's nice to see. We don't usually get a team of people that come in here, but what I'd like to ask you is, what challenges are you having right now regarding your, this particular conversation here? Would you tell us about it? I'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, well, let me introduce the comments. In the Herbiger case, we are the business partner in People and Culture. Is our human resources department. It's named People and Culture in Herbiger. Rocio Lopez is lead the department, and the rest of the team as part of the management team in Herbiger, Mexico, right? And the first challenge for us in this year, I mean, we are in a pandemic situation, but this situation allows to us to restructure our team in order to find the right team, the right people in the right position. Okay. So in that's the reason why in this year we are hiring a new people in our company. Herbiger is a very interesting company regarding the culture, okay, because it's a company that has 100 years in the market founded, and the new people have to be clear in our culture, in our priorities, in our activities, in our commitment with our customer as well. And the challenge for the year is try to get the most better attitude of these people in order to align on our culture, because it's a very interesting culture, but our behavior, our environment is a little complicated, because the Latin American region has a specific activities that the operation could be different. For example, with comparing with the United States or the mature market, okay, Europe. I mean, so our main challenge for this year is try to keep engaged these new people in our company, and the target that Fernando, Guillermo, Judith, Rocio, and me and myself is to keep engaged to the people, and the guarantee the orientation in order to get the most or the better attitude, the better target, the better result from them. So this is the reason why our team is present here in this meeting. Very interesting meeting also. For the last comment from my side is that I have to highlight the comment. Herbiger has a very strong human resource department. The philosophy, the aptitude, the accomplishment is a little company. We have the same culture in order to protect the people like Herbiger is doing right now. So this activity is focus on get more information in order to strong our aptitudes as well. So
yeah, and again, I think what's really important is for small organizations, obviously your goal is to grow. And so one of the things that's very important is to get this initial orientation and onboarding, even your selection process, you need to make sure that that's very tight. And as I sort of said, we'll send you the video from last time, but selecting the right people first and making that process, it's actually an extension of orientation and onboarding. We actually put those three elements together because the selection is never perfect. People can fake their way through it. There's a lot of things that can happen. So the orientation onboarding is your chance to really look. What you described before is that some people turn up with no energy, no interest. That means, well, maybe we didn't get the right person. That's why that process of the orientation onboarding, it's your chance to test that you've got that person. And I can't stress this enough, that this process of selection, orientation, onboarding, You have those first 30 to 60 days. And it's critical that you're assessing your processes. And if you're finding people are turning up to orientation, say, and they don't have any interest and they don't have any energy, you've got a hiring problem. You've got the, and again, if you go back and look at the video we'll send out to you, there's attraction and selection. You know, how are you doing to attract the right people? Advertising, promotions, there's a lot of that goes into it that we describe in that seminar. And then it's the selection. How do we select the right people? What we find is a lot of mistakes are made at selection because managers are choosing people that look like them, feel like them, everything. They choose people that are very much in their own light, not the company's light. And so by the time you get to orientation, use that as a kind of a test to say, well, wait up, half of the people here are half asleep or they're not really that interested. Wait up, how did they get here? And so think of the 3 steps, the recruitment, which is selection and attraction, orientation and onboarding, as your ability to look at how good you are in getting the right people. And then once you've got the right people, keeping the right people, because that becomes the next part of it. And that's why we talked about, you must emotionally connect with them. They got to feel welcome. They've got to understand the priorities. That first day, make that the best experience. Because what it does is it elevates your employee brand as well, which means they should go home after the first day and say, that was the best day of work I've ever been to. Why? Did you work? No. But they made me feel welcome. I understand it reinforced why I chose this company. And I know from that first day that they care for me. So that's such an important package together. And that you're focusing on each step of that and challenging whether or not you've got that right.
Exactly. I
just
agree.
want to say this.
Let me ask you something finally, please. For the first, I think that I know what will be the answer, but in your opinion, Shane, do you think that for the first 60 days for the people, the micromanagement is necessary, or never we have to thinking about the micromanagement like an option?
Yeah, it's a really great piece. The way that I say it is that the onboarding process might be 15 days, 30 days. During that time, what you would call micromanagement. If at the end of that, there is no micromanagement. So you enable them through the onboarding process, get them trained, get them set up, then let them go. What happens is a lot of managers keep micromanaging them. And then that's a waste of talent as well. So you've got to set them up for success, which means give them the skills, give them the tools, teach them how to get the information, teach them how to be on their own, set them up so that they can make it. At the end of onboarding, they should not need micromanagement. Then you go into inspect what you expect. So those first few days, and that's why everyone's onboarding is different. It is the length of time that it takes for you to set them up for success. So yes, they'll be more focused, they'll get more attention. But at the end of that, if you've tested and they're the right people, hands off. And that's something else you got to check with your managers. At the end of that, they can't keep micromanaging them because then they'll leave. That you have to be willing now to let them work on their own, be themselves. It's a really great question and important mistake is that a lot of managers keep micromanaging after the onboarding.
Thank you, Shane.